Welcome! Today we're going to check what are models in Vapor. So in Fluent concept, in Influence concept, models serve as representations of database tables or collections and encapsulate the data structures and relationships within your Vapor application. You have a model and corresponds to a specific schema and is designed important stuff as a Swift class conforming to that model protocol of coming out of Fluent. We're going to check what are Fluent models. We'll see some nice property wrappers, and in the end, we're going to see what do we mean by migrations. In Vapor's Fluent ORM, models serve as representations of database tables or collections, encapsulating the data structures and relationships within your Vapor application. Each model corresponds to a specific schema and is defined as a Swift class. This is very important because we use Swift with Vapor, and that's the key thing here. And you'll have to conform to a protocol, a model that is called model. To create one, we're going to see in the demo, you define a Swift class that specifies the associated schema, unique identifier, and if you want, some fields, various fields representing the data attributes. The nice part is that we have property wrappers. What are property wrappers, you might ask, or you know already? Property wrappers are a Swift feature that allows you to add custom behavior to properties. You have that at in front of the property. They provide a mechanism to encapsulate some more complex logic related to how properties are stored and retrieved. In the end, it's a structure that wraps a property, managing how the value is stored, retrieved, or updated. In Vapor, we have plenty of those. First one is this @id, which is used to define the unique identifier for your model. By default, the ID should use a special key.id and refers to the default identifier for your database. Then you have the add field, which you map a property to a database column, and optional field, where it's something used for something optional. And with this, you'll allow the nil values to be inserted in your database. With the other one, add field, you won't allow optionals. It's mandatory to have non-nil values inside the database. We also have additional property wrappers, enum and timestamp, plus others. You can store actual Swift enums as database fields. These are typically stored as string or int primitives inside the database itself. But it's important to know that the enum must conform to codable, so Fluent can encode and decode it. It's better to have them as strings, as a string enums, but you can also use int if you prefer. So in the end, you use an enum as a model and you can store it inside the database. What about timestamp? Well, Fluent provides a timestamp property wrapper to automatically handle date fields such as creation, update, and deletion times. And you'd have a date inside the database. You can store one as a created at when you create that object, and this will set the timestamp to when the model is first saved inside the database. Then you can use updated at, for example, a key, and this timestamp will automatically be updated whenever the model is modified. And delete, of course, you can think about soft deletion that object instead of actually deleting the object from the database, and you use this timestamp to know when the Vapor has been deleted. All right, so with timestamp, you ensure that your models handle date tracking automatically without needing manual updates for it. It's important to understand what are migrations. And Vapor has this concept, which allows to create, modify, or delete tables or columns while keeping the database structure changes version control. You perform some modification to your database by adding a new table, or you delete some properties, you have to perform a migration. And you have some APIs you can use. You need to conform the structure, the model to migration. And then you'd specify the fields that you want to update using the prepare on database method. You also need to register those migrations inside the configure.swift file. And then you need to run the specific migration, the Vapor run migrate. And you can also revert migration. All right, now let's see how we can do that. Okay, so last time we defined the CRUD methods for our controller that controls the person entity. Now I would like to introduce the actual Fluent entity to work with the data here. And we're going to use it to store data and implement the same methods as we did in the past. Right now, we're using this array of persons, which is stored in like this server's memory. And I would like to change the behavior and actually use the name person for the actual model. So first, let's rename this to something else. Let's call it legacy person. Rename it. Okay, so I renamed here person to legacy person, and it changed like all places where that reference of the model was found. All right, so let's create our person entity, person model. I will call it person. And I'll do that. Let's import Fluent. And here I can say final class. I don't intend to subclass it, and it helps a bit of a compiler if I declare it final. It needs to extend model. And here I need to implement a few things. If I command click model, I can see that it requires an ID value and any model extend schema. Here I have a bunch of static variables with defaulted values. So the only requirement I see is like the ID value. So let's add conformance. Also added me the schema here. Okay, I can say it's persons here, and ID value, let's make a UUID. If we import foundation for it. Okay, and here let's say that schema equals like this. All right, type person does not confirm model. Let's see what else. All right, I also need a property here, ID. So here I have a warning about the stored property ID of sendable conforming class person is mutable. I have an error for Swift 6. Basically, this is what I'm saying. And this happens because the property wrappers from Vapor and from Swift require them like everything should be sendable, and there are some property wrappers which are not sendable. So the recommendation is to make this unchecked sendable, and warning should go away. Okay. I can arrange a bit this. I can put the schema in front with the name of the table. And here I can say ID, use this property wrapper, and have the key ID, which takes this variable UUID. I have to make it optional because at first I don't have the UUID. It will be created later. Let's also create an empty initializer here. And let's see what else we can add. I'll say we need a field for the name of the person. Let's call it name. Every property needs to be mutable, so that it can be read by the property wrappers. One is string. We also have the date of birth, if you remember here. We have the date of birth, which is an optional date. To have an optional thing, you can say optional field. Let's put here the key date of birth. Date of birth. I can declare it as date first. And that was the legacy part, but I would like to try more property wrappers here. Let's create also a nested object that we can use to mark the eye color or the hair color. So here is the enum. Let's call it eye color. We can make it a string enum. So it can be codable string, make it codable. And let's say a few blue, black, and other here. All right. And to make it part of the person, and since we consider it as an optional thing, remember you have optional and you can say optional enum. Let's use the key eye color, eye color, eye color. What else? I would like also to have a boolean to see if the record that it's going to be saved in the database is active or not. I can say is active, is a boolean, and I would like to record the operations that we have for a person entity, such as whenever a person record is created, I would like to have the date of that creation, also when it gets modified and deleted. And if you remember, we had those add timestamp property wrappers that record the thing for us. So we can say key here, created at. I want this one to be on create. This one on update. This one, let's call it delete. Delete. And the variable can be a date. I'll mark it as optional. And here, say updated at. Updated at. Delete it. Delete. Oh. Okay, finally, let's create an initializer. Everything, right? And let's see how can we migrate to this new entity our CRUD operations there. Before using an actual main model, we also need to migrate main model, and we can do that by creating a migration structure class that inherits from Vapor's migration, and then we should run that migration whenever we start the server, for example, or whenever it makes sense in our application. So let's create a new folder here. I will do new folder, migrations, and I'll create a new file. Let's call it create person migration or Fluent. Struct person migration. I will use async migration from Fluent. Let's click. It exposes two methods, prepare and revert, and we should implement both of them. On prepare, let's delete this prefix. First, we have the database, which uses the schema of person, but we also have the enum, the eye colors, that needs to be also created as a entity here. And both of them, we can migrate them to the database. Well, first one, let's create an eye color. I'm using database, but here special function called enum that gives me back an enum builder. Name it eye color. Here is async await, try await. And here I need to specify all cases. Eye color black, pro value, also have blue and other. And finally, we should create the migration, putting it as a variable because I plan to use it in the database migration of the person, like the person schema eventually. And this one is async await as well, database schema. Let's use person schema. We need to add space, and here what properties we have. We have ID, we have the full name, which is a string. We should make it required. We have the date of birth, which is the date. Those dates created at, let's put it as date time, dated at, and deleted at. Deleted at, right? Let's do the eye color. here, let's say eye color field is active, the boolean free. It's full, make it required as well. And one interesting part is like if you don't want to save it as true, false, or whatever, you can save it in a different way. I or no. You can change the format here of the boolean, and you have like different ways. If you don't want to save it as 1, 0, or true or false, you can specify here 1 on off, or you can say in. If I have it like that, it's up to you. And if you do it, then you probably need to specify also the initial part. You can do that with this custom attribute, which is like any sendable, and you can say default, and here put the value, you should put in, whatever. All right. And don't forget to create. We created the two database, so we prepare that. And we also need to implement this repo function. I'll do the prefix as well. And here you can say await database. For the enum, I color delete and schema. And here we can say person schema delete. So whenever the revert is happening, we're going to delete the database. All right. After you create a migration, you also need to register it. Do that in the configure function and do it. Migrations. Say add the name of the migration person migration. Okay, so you also need to migrate the things. Let's add here to do. Not forget to run the migrations. It's not essentially just to run everything, but we also need to migrate. Now let's move to the controller and try to migrate out of this legacy person and focus on the Fluent methods using the actual Fluent database. What's happening here? Let's take the create function first. I'm having here a request, and then I throw the legacy person. Now we want to separate the actual models that get stored in the database from the actual data or objects that are being sent to the persons outside, like the response of the incoming request or the actual request content. And this concept is called like you create a local model, like a data transfer object or a domain transfer object. And for more, in general, you want to use these DTOs to represent your request or response content specifically. It helps you to decouple and to not add unnecessary constraints to your Fluent model. For example, when you create a person, you don't pass the ID. You might want to pass a few parameters than the actual representation of the model requires. So we create a separate structure for that. And same with the response. Like you don't want to pass everything. You might want to just pass the ID of and so on. And that's why we introduce this concept of DTOs, which we already did here, which are these create and update persons. All right, so I would like to have better representation of the request and the response, considering now we have also a Fluent model, and my DTOs, I want to recreate them. Right, so I have one DTO for request and one DTO for response. For the request, I don't need to pass the ID, for example. But on the response, I would like to have that ID and also the mandatory parameters such as name of the person is active. Yeah, the ID. So let's create one person request content. That's the papers content, which is like the same as codable. And here in the request, I don't want to pass. I mean, the name is mandatory when you create a person, but can be left out when you update one because we're doing a patch update. Not all fields are required. Date of birth is active. I'll make them optional for the update. Eye color I can make it a string here. I don't need to pass the enum. And I think that's it. And for the response, let's create a person response content. And here have the same parameters, but name should be mandatory. Exactly should be mandatory as well. And since I'm fetching data from the database, I want my ID to be non-optional, to be mandatory. Now let's try to create a person with what we have. What did we have here? We have the request object, which decodes a create person. Now I want a person request content. And I want to add a guard because here I created a name optional, but actually the name will be required. So if somebody passes a null name, I'll throw an error. So let's check request object, say guard let name request object of name, and here I will throw an error, export board, add request, and put the reason name is required. So whenever we have a request that doesn't contain a name, we'll throw this error. Assuming now the person is fine, I can create my Fluent model. And let's create actually convenience initializer here as well. With the DTO. I'll create a folder, DTOs, and I can place my person request content here. And here I want a helper for my model. I want to create an initializer for person that takes this request content and creates the database. And you can say here a convenience initializer that takes the request content, which is the person request content, and the name. We can take also the name from the request content, but remember we had that guard that extracts the information and then we can use it like this. Up to you. Date of birth. Take it from the request content, date of birth. What else? My color, request content, color, and is active. Content is active. Since this is a Boolean flag for my database, I don't expect to be put it inside the request that is coming. So I will add a default here, say true. By default, it will be true. Remember that the request has a string, but the iColor is a enum. So we need to map that string into an enum. I can create here a static function, get iColor. And here we can say string value, which is an optional, and I expect to return an iColor, which is my Fluent iColor enum. Can say guarded value as nil here, and if it's not nil, I can say return iColor raw value. And here I will pass the value, and you can now call this function get iColor from request content iColor. All right. With this helper, I can now go back to my controller and use it. Person, I have it here, person request content. I'll pass the request, let's call it request content. I'm changing it here. And name this name. All right, I created a person here. What's next? After you create the Fluent model, you need to save it somewhere inside the database, of course. And to do that, we have a function called, we use the model name, model object. And here we have save. And the database is being taken from the request.tb. This can throw an error, try await, in a function that does not support concurrency, right? We can make it as sendable. Here, I don't want to return legacy percent. And here we can say async throws. Right. Now, I have the person, I saved it inside the database, and now I like to return the response here. I don't want to return the database. As I mentioned, I want to decouple the models that I'm using as a DTO, data transfer object or domain transfer object, from the actual Fluent models. So this should be a person response content, which is right here. I will command cut and put it here, import vapor, because we need this content protocol. Now I can go back to my person's controller and allocate that person content. As is this one, we don't want anymore. Right, so person response content. I would like also to create a convenience initializer because I don't want to pass every time those parameters. So let's do here extension response, say mark helpers here for the person, person, and I can say ID person.id. I can make it throws here and have this require ID, and I color, let's say raw value here. And let's go back to the person's controller, and here we just say person. And that's it. Okay, this can throw, I can make it as try. All right, so this is the create method. Now let's also update the read part, and we're going to test. And after we can update the method on the delete one. Read persons. All right, here we returned persons, but now we need to read all persons and return them. And we can do that with the query attribute, query function, and the person entity. And we take the object, we take the array, like all person, and then we can map it to the response content response object, this one. Right. So get persons, I will change the parameters return here, person response content. First, we need to fetch all persons from the database. And we can say person query request DB. So now we need here the request and all. We need to take everything here. This is await, sync await. Let's put it here sync, and can also throw an. All right, so we have the persons. Now we need to map them to our person response persons that map person in, and here I would like to return person response content person. So and get and here let's see yeah, await needs to go after right to shift. Right, so this is how we get the persons. Now we should also get the person. Okay, we have person / ID of that person, and now I need to take the ID and find it on my database. So query the database. We can take this approach with query, fetch everything, and then filter out the ID, but it's a bit inefficient. We can directly call on the Fluent database model with the function find, and in the find we can place the ID that we fetch from the request. So we can say here person is person find And you see here I have the ID, which I decoded and should be as part of the request database. And I think this is a single wait. I need to wait. All right, here I need to await. All right, and those here. Don't mind the errors right now. All right, so I found the person, or it's I think it's an optional person. I can say let in case we didn't find anything. We can throw an error here with the reason not found. Okay, but if we found it, then we need to map this person when modeling my DTO like we did before. Say return file. Yeah, we need to return this response content. All right. Update person, we'll do it later, but I will want to run. All right, here I'm having a legacy person. I will comment out and put some dummy data here. So the project compiles and I can check my what I did here basically. Okay, so here I need to put a wait. Get person, I need to pass the request now. And here I should be request in get similar what we had before. And this one is a wait. But I also can throw an error, so I'm not going to try. And here is the same thing. It's a sync function. I need to wait for the results. And now the server should compile. I'll run it, but there's one more thing we need to do. If you remember, we created this migration, but we also need to run the migration. It's not that simple to just create it and do it. And there are multiple ways to run a migration. You can do it in the scheme. You can create in the one of the actions here. You can specify an action to run a migration, or you can specify here an argument passed on launch, and it will migrate the database for you. Or you can do it by code and run the migration yourself. But it would be advisable to do that before starting the server, before running the application. If I'm opening Postman and check now, so I haven't run any migrations. Okay, here post and let's put the name John and the date of birth here. And you see no such table persons. Basically, I don't have any tables. That's why I need to create them. And this is happening here on prepare function. So the database will be created there. I will run the migrations by code, and this is fairly easy to do. Auto migrate. It will run for migration without confirmation, but you can also trigger this with the auto migrate flag. All right, and this is throwing an error, and I need to wait for the migration to happen before creating the routes. Let's rerun the server, and you see here, starting prepare, database ID, upgrade person migration, and finish prepare. So it migrated my tables. Now the server has started, and I should be good to go. If I rerun the same thing, I see now it's working. I get back my DTO, actually, is the name date. You see here, it added is active, and now I have a UDID for my created person. Let's create also another one called Jane. And if I'm fetching everything, I see here it's working. I could see the date of birth for the first one, and the second one doesn't have one. And see if the ID one is working. I'm doing get by ID, and I have the object. So everything is right. It's functioning well. I'll stop the server now and move on with the update and delete functions. We still need to update those so they can work with the Fluent database. So we stopped here. What is happening here? So first we need to take from the request the fields that we need to update, including the ID of the person that we want to update. Make those updates and then return the updated object. I will delete everything here and say, all right, first thing, let's take the ID of the person. Let me update to import foundation. And we can do request parameters, not get, and the name should be ID. Now let's fetch person. Find, and if you remember, we had this gardlet. So basically, this is what I'm doing again. Let's copy it here and paste it. Let's sync rows, and here person response content, which will contain the updated fields. Okay, I have the person which is currently existing in my database. Now the next thing is to take the request parameter that will pass here. So request content, request content code, and I have the person request content.set. It's exactly the same as we did for the create. So it's the same thing here. I have the request parameters. If I have a name, request content dot name, then let's update the name. Person dot name equals name. And same if what was date of birth, person dot date of birth equals date of birth, and so on and so forth. I see quite like repetitive code here, and let's move this thing inside the function or something like that. I can create here helpers. I can actually create an extension over the person's controller and create a helper method there, but I can actually directly use the person entity and set the values there. Let's do that. So I will create an extension over the person, and here I can say set value, which is the generic, can be optional. It allows me to do something, and here I can use the keypad. Like I prefer to have the keypad rather than the property, and should be a writable extension. The keypad should be writable. Choosing reference writable keypad because a person is like an entity. And here I have the arguments, which is person, and here the value that I'm writing to that property. So it's like I have a property and I need to put something there. So if I have the value, then use the key path, that property, and put the value inside it. All right. And if I go back to the update method, I can say person set value, and here I can place content.name to my name property. And similar the date of birth, date of birth to date of birth. I can delete this if that's which looks better from my point of view. Okay, so I'm setting those values, right? We also have set value for request content dot eye color is active, and here. And the eye color is a bit different because I'm having an enum stored in my Fluent model database, but I'm having a string value out of the request. And I can create here another helper method with eye color or value. So here I'm passing string. If I have the color value, then eye color should be eye color value. Perfect. And I can put here person eye color request content. Nice. Yeah, because we can also make this sendable. So the read ones we can make it sendable, so they are safe in a concurrency world. I will update that in a moment. So we set the values right here. We took the request content, we updated the person database model, but we also need to sync those values, right? So we can do that with person.update on here request.db. You can throw and I need to wait. So I updated here the values. I made the update right here. Now for the final part, I just need to return this new person as a response content object. And if you remember, we already created a convenience initializer and we can just return it like that, but it can throw an error. So I marked this try. All right, so this is the update function. Let's also update the delete one. The idea goes the same. We need to take the ID of the person we want to delete, find that person inside the database. All right, it's a sync. And then we use the request.database to delete that person. And the function is try wait person dot delete. Cool. Now we need to update this. Put update request. It's await now. Wait. Wait. Let's try to update the person. I'm running the server again. Okay. Let's open Postman. I will create a person named Jane. Post. Let's delete the ID. Okay. Also, let's create another one, John. Right. Now let's update it to what fields? Name John updated. John Doe. Let's put the name John Doe and see if it's working. All right, it's working. What else? I can say is active false. You see here the boolean has been turned off. Date of birth. Do solvent to 2. All right, got updated. And let's also add the eye color. It's black. I see here the eye color has been updated to black. All right, so the update is working. Let's switch all the persons here. Okay, so and I will delete this record with the ID C4. Right, no content. Now if I do get, I see not found. And let's try also fetch everything. And I also see the second record. All right, so delete and update are working perfectly fine. Now I want to, we can safely delete this legacy content. So we don't need these persons anymore. And now we're having a good implementation with the Fluent database. How awesome is that? Next, I would like to, okay, so I have here the response content, but I would also like to include the created at, updated at dates, and delete to the response here. And see if those are getting created or not. At, let's create a person here, those persons, put here the information. And now I see the created and updated that dates have been set. If I'm updating the person now. I do put, and here we show though should see a different date for updated. So I see here it's a different timestamp. It's like 6. Okay, so it's fine. And for the deleted part, we have two ways of deleting records. We can have a soft deletion and a brute deletion. Okay, now if you have the key inside the entity here, person, so, the key, this one, if you have this timestamp, the records will be soft deleted. You can use this and they will be soft deleted, which means if let's stop, I can go here in the person's controller, and when I fetch everything, I can include with deleted here with this variable deleted, and I will see the records that I have been deleted, and that's called soft deletion. If you want to restore those records that have been deleted, you can call person.restore and specify the request database. And yeah, if you want to omit them from a particular query, you just remove the with deleted part. Let's try it out. I'm going to create a person. Let's do this ID. Okay, I have it here, creating whatever, and now I want to delete the person that I created. The ID. Okay, no content. So if I get everything, I should have it included in the response, and I have it, but it has also the deleted at date here. All right. You can also force a deletion, like even though you're having that soft deletion timestamp, you can go and delete the person with person delete. Here you can say force through. You can delete a person with force attribute. You have here, but it also takes a force parameter. You see here, force is defaulting to false, but you can say, okay, delete that for real, and it will get deleted from the database. All right, and that was it. I will stop.